So one of the through lines of most of the discussions that we've had during this week, and this week went pretty quickly, has been China. While we have talked about India a good bit, the US and the political ramifications from decisions that the current US administration has made during this second term of Trump's presidency, China always has been looming in the background, and no assessment of the international trade landscape is complete without a deep dive into the state of the Chinese economy. What makes it tick? What are its most pressing challenges? Dr. Sarah Tong is Senior Research Fellow and Cluster Head for the Economics team at the East Asian Institute, the National University of Singapore. She obtained her PhD in economics from the University of California at San Diego. Beautiful place to be, right?
Yes.
Her research interests concentrate on the development and transformation of the Chinese economy, including development in trade and foreign investment, development of regions, financial sector reforms, reform of state-owned enterprises, and industrial policies and restructuring. Her work has appeared globally in the Journal of International Economics, the Global Economic Review for China, and many other publications. And before I turn it over to Dr. Tong, I want to just offer this note. Dr. Tong is an economist. She's not a political figure. This is going to be a discussion about the economics of China. We've discussed a lot of the political ramifications of China in our previous sessions. So I think this would be most instructive to focus on the economics of China and what makes it tick. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Tong, and please welcome her.
Thank you very much. Is the voice enough? Okay. I'll stand here first, and then I'll so already mentioned, Johnson mentioned I'm an economist. That's purposely I don't need to repeat that. But of course, politics always gets in it. So number one. Number two, China is always there. You mentioned or not. So I work for a policy think tank for Singapore. But there are too many things to talk about when it comes to China and questions. So I do try to get time that we can discuss. But I also want to say ahead of time that when I was approached to have this conversation, I'm a little bit hesitant because journalists, it's a little bit intimidating to me, just to put that forward. I'm going to be talking about economics mostly, but in practice, I was working for think tanks in Beijing, and then I go to school, and then I was also an academic in the department, the teaching department, which that's why I published something. And now I'm a policy analyst, so jumping around, but right now it's more on the policy analysis. So let me get started. I have to apologize if the PowerPoints are a bit rough because I was not. So I'm talking about three things: development, policies, and prospect. So intentionally, I'm mostly going to just say several things. Number one, looking at China's economy to itself. So what are the dynamics? What are the landscape? People might use that term. So I want to say two things on that. Number one is that China has impressed many people, including Chinese themselves. At the same time, that exceptional or outstanding performance also bring up a lot of questions and issues and challenges. So sometimes you get problem because you're too successful in what you're pursuing. So that's the things I want to say. So if we look at China, these are quite and as journalists, you probably have heard it thousands of times. What I mentioned several things. Number one is the world largest, the second largest since the early 2010s. Second is the largest manufacturer as well as the trading nation. So number one in two things, making things, and then trading with the rest. And then in terms of size, China's size right now is number two in population, second to India, just from a couple years ago, but in terms of economic size. But what I want to bring in later on, when I show you some photos, figures, is that since early 2010s, growth has been continuously and persistently decelerated. Okay, so that's when I said the success has brought in questions and issues and contradictions and tension. All right, so those are some of the key points. But let me just show you. This is the, I borrowed this from this source. You know, they do a lot of visualization. So if you compare 2016 to 2026 that China remains the second. I think Japan has shifted slightly to number, but 2011 I think China overtook Japan to become the second, and then now remains the second. Just pictures. The second point I mentioned is about the capacity, because we're talking about global overcapacity, imbalances, and so on. That's partly because China has pursued very strongly on this manufacturing, industrial capacity, self-reliance, and so on and so forth. Everything's the 50s and 60s, but in the past 2 decades, especially since 2001, when China joined the World Trade Organization, it has been so successful. This is the projection to 2030, but right now, China's manufacturing value added, it's not just output, it's the value added, account for about 28 to 29%. This projection to say that in 2030 is going to be something else. But I do not want to stick to this number, but currently, 25, 26 years after the WTO accession is about 30%. So that means it's a very, 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 very important and central in terms of when we talk about supply chains or production network. We used to use the word production network. Now it's supply chain here, supply chain everywhere. So that's the second point. The third one, which I mentioned also, is about trade. Okay, so this is the largest exporter. Exporters and importers. If you add the two things together, then you get the volume or the total size of trade, and that is clearly China has been a very big player or the number one player there. So that's the sort of the first part when I talk about China. Why is China everywhere? You know, the recently concluded G7, China wasn't there, but I think a lot of the conversations, especially the how to address international global imbalances, China is of course in the background or in people's mind. So I do want to highlight that we have placed a lot of emphasis on trade, on China's surplus. I do want to highlight that there's also a sizable trade in services. So this is, on the left side is good, on the right side is services. So if you look at China, data starts only 2017, while the good trade goes back, way back. So China has consistently had a trade deficit in services. Because in a lot of sort of technology, trade-related services or modern services, what we call, not just the hotels and restaurants, but more information, information technology, or otherwise. Okay, so notice that this is different. The scale is different. So this is about maybe 1/4 or even in terms of the size. So you don't look at the bars are the size of the bar, but the unit is different. I just want to highlight that trade in goods is just one story. It's a very important one, and it's also one that's very, very significant when you consider employment and distribution of income. Right? Manufacturing have give you a huge range of skill levels that people get employed. So that's why we focus on the manufacturing and industries and so on and so forth. Recently, we're going to have a lot more, people have paid a lot more attention on energy issues. So let me just move on. So this is the part on the growth. China started the so-called reform in 1978. There's a period that's a lot of domestic liberalization, SOE reforms in the private sector development and so on and so forth. 2001 is the WTO accession. And I'm looking at only from 2010 because this is sort of the beginning of a shift. Before that, if you look at the overall and average growth, it's about 10% a year. On average, you have ups and downs, of course. But what we can see here is from early 2010s that things are becoming to change. To change in the sense that it's not unusual. It is usual. It is unusual in the sense that it has lasted quite long. It's important because of the impact is different. Impact domestically and impact globally, because it's so large that what happens in China does not just affect China. It affects neighbors, close and far, right? So what we can see here is from about 10% in 2010 and coming down to, this is a very nice AI help. I gave numbers to AI and then say, okay, give me this one. So, but the numbers I check, I know the number. So this is over 10 before 2010, and then coming down to like 7 to 8%. Remember the 温家宝 time is 保八, is secure, ensure that we get 8%, right? So then it comes down to about 5. And the latest one, early this year, when the two sessions, the big two meetings, they have issued the so-called 15th five-year development program. For sure, people use FYP, 5-year plan, but China from 2011 but take out the plan to say it's not a plan. We are not in the planned economy, we're a program. So for this year, for this next 5 years, the 5-year, there's no target. There's no target for how much we should be growing. Expected, took that number out. Just to say that, all right, but of course the numbers can be questionable. Not just the journalists question the numbers, economists question the number as well. So that's on the side, but we can see the COVID here and the recovery and continue to decelerate. Okay, so that's pretty much the picture I want to show. There are a lot of advancement, there are a lot of progress, but behind that is the pain to change, the pain to restructure, to change the paradigm. And that is what the Chinese leadership has to deal with, have to face, has to deal with. Okay, so let me just talk about what, how to read this, how to read these numbers, how to read this landscape, this changing landscape. So I want to we want to focus a lot more on trade issues, because trade is when China place or exert its influence and impact on the rest of the world. But when you read China, you have to read China a little bit inside out. If you only look at from the outside, then you might misread it, and then your responses may not be targeted correctly, all right? So let me just look at the domestic challenges and constraints. I'm not going to get into details in that, but a few things I want to highlight. Number one is the diversity and inequality. So that's a double-edged sword. Is that the right way to say it? So China's resilience, when we talk about post-COVID, and then the tariffs and the tensions and the geopolitical rivalry and this and that, but China's economy seemed to be more resilient than we feared, than we sort of expected. And that first part, the diversity internally, between regions, and that gave you the resilience. That means when people are very struggling, they're willing to work hard, whatever the job is. So right now in China, you have the term the involution. People are competing at very low returns on your hours, but you're still willing to do that. So that diversity gives you the source of resilience of people. The diversity among regions also gave you the room for different types of businesses, different types of sectors to survive. And that diversity also gives you the room to build domestic supply chain resilience, right? So it is a double-edged sword because it's good and it's bad. I used to be telling my colleagues and say, I don't like the expression that Chinese are resilient. It's true, but that's not necessarily a good thing. I want people to be not resilient. I can go back if I'm too tired and I still get money to get, right? I have pensions and unemployment security payout and so on and so on. You don't get that. You get a little bit, but you get very little. So you have to struggle. And so that's why I'm not very fond of that expression that Chinese is resilient. People are resilient if they're forced to be, all right? So that's the one I want to highlight, that everything is not just come with good only. I have the other side of the story. So that also gave the so-called overcapacity, why the Chinese goods are better quality compared to the past, at the same time at a very friendly, people-friendly price, because people are willing to do it. If you live in China, because I visited my hometown, my families often, it's so convenient. You just sit there and then and things. Once I order something online, 20 minutes yogurt. I like a particular yogurt brand from Beijing. I'm in Tianjin. And I ordered it 20 minutes, it was knocking on my door. That is the thing that's very, very competitive to its extreme. All right, the second one, population. I also want to say population for the most part is very pressure. It's a lot pressure. Partly because population are aging. Fertility rate are declining and very low. Marriage is quite low because the mismatch. In big cities, Shanghai, Beijing, you have a lot of very highly educated, capable women, and then you don't have enough matching because the tradition is you want to marry up. For ladies, right? You don't want to marry down. And then in other sort of backward cities, third tier, fifth tier, then you have the other way around, or in the countryside and so on. So the structure of the population are very skewed because of the baby boomer of my generation in the 60s, early 60s, and then you have the 80s one-child policy, and then you have now many, many old people. Senior people, senior citizens, not old, don't use that word. I don't know what's happening here. So anyway, the size is still big. The size is still big, and the older generation, my generation, they got retired at 55, and sometimes 50 for ladies, and for men it's 60. Then they're retired, they have good jobs and pensions, but what do they do? What do they do with that? In the bank, right? And put in, or sometimes help their kids to get houses and so on. But for the young generation, now the youth unemployment rate is 20% above. They changed the calculation and the measurement and so on and so forth. So again, that is good thing in the sense you still have a large population, but the structure and the future prospect are quite threatening or quite alarming. That's the second part. The third one, I think this two I don't need to say anything, but this one, the real estate, from 2023, I think, I don't know what year. So the government decided to, oh no, the bubble is too much. So they issued the so-called the 3 lines. Don't ask me what are they. AI can tell you. So the housing market came down dramatically and stays down. And right now, in the past few years, investment in the sector is negative 10% continuously. Why is that important? It's important because housing is one of the major sources of wealth for households. That means the price is coming down, so people feel that they're poorer, and they also have to pay out the mortgages and so on. So that has a wealth impact on consumption. That also, because the sector is very much related to the other sectors, other manufacturing sectors. So that brings down the overall economic activity. More troubling is that land sale, to make it simple, but in reality is the transfer of land use is dominated or monopolized by local government that constitute the major part of local income, government income. All right, so that is directly leading to local government physical deterioration. And that is one of the key issues for the economy domestically, because Chinese local government are not government. They are venture capitalist, they are industrial promoted, and they are in charge of local industrial policies and technology policies, whatever, and they are also paying the bills to pensioners, teachers, and so on and so forth. And let me not get into the physical system, how central local is related, but we can get to that in case you're interested. So local government are very, very squeezed. Very, very squeezed. The major source of the income on taxes, they have to turn up to the central government and wait for the return. Not a return, transfer. And that transfer is a complicated process. All right, so let me not talking about this too, it's quite standard. Externally, all right, so this is even more straightforward for you. So we have questions later on. All right, so the earlier one, we look at the growth, and this one is looking at what contribute to the growth, 5% or 10% or whatever. So this is from economics, very simple, 3 components: consumption, capital formation, and net exports, right? So what we can see in the last couple years, growth is decelerated to around 5, and here's the net export. So why is China's trade is the economy looks very resilient? It's able to sustain a net export. So that's the imbalance that we observe outside. But internally, domestically, that is a very crucial element to maintain some kind of growth. Otherwise, it's going to be here, right? If we don't have this. Or if you have it negative, then you bring down the overall. So domestically, China cannot afford to lose out in trade at present. Is domestic consumption important? Yes, it is important because you have a large population, of course, consumption. And part of that is government spending, and part of it is household. So government can actually have a quite stable part, and the household are struggling. And everyone, or the government is giving out vouchers and so on and so forth. Take note that, how am I doing with time? Okay, because economists talk and then cannot stop. All right, so so during COVID, I am in Singapore, and even this year, you got money go into your account. You can go to supermarket, you can go to little restaurants to use that money. That doesn't happen in China. What happened in China is that if you buy this product, it's going to get discounted. You got voucher for buying certain brands, certain products, and those products and those brands are what China is doing well, right? So partly to support the manufacturing. Okay. Number one, they don't have money. Number two, they want to support domestic production, right? So the consumption, let's just ignore this one. So consumption, government, remember this is because it goes up and down, but in general, consumption remains a very important and key element. And here is the capital formation, which is investment plus the change in inventory, right? So when China is actually doing quite strong in the early years, it also has a trade surplus, but now trade surplus is even more important because the other tools are not doing so good. China has been talking about changing from investment-driven, export-oriented growth toward domestic consumption-driven. So that slogan has been there for a long time. But think about it, when I talk about the diversity, when I talk about the income inequality, that shift is not that central government says something and then everyone is working on it. It's very hard and it's very time consuming and it needs money to do that when the local government is in such distress and you get a lot of problems. Shortly after COVID, when I was visiting my colleagues and my families back home, you hear stories. You hear stories because the local government are so short of money. They are getting a lot of the money from the hospitals because COVID time, hospitals are going to be useful. After the COVID, hospitals remain to be very important. So in my hometown, Tianjin is, which my colleagues always reminded me, is number 2 in the ranking for terrible public finance, physical income. So local government, Tianjin government in particular, has been in distress for quite some time, which I will not get into. Just to say that I heard stories that people are required or asked to pay back the bonuses that you received before, because back then the regulations are not standard, and then we want to make corrections. So there's a lot of activities or measures local government has to utilize to help their public finance, right? So just to mention a few things here, net export is very important, or surplus is very important to at least maintain some growth that the government have in mind. They don't say that we want to do this, we want to do that. They say, oh, this year is going to be around 5. And how to do that? You need to try very hard. You utilize all the measures you have at hand. All right. So I think in the external part, when I mentioned about the constraints and challenges, I mentioned about the reliance on foreign technology, and in part, The challenges is also that China continue to rely heavily on trade, which we show here. This is just the one from visual from them. So I just grabbed a few for the convenience. So this is sort of products, major products that China and the US are trading with each other. What you can see is there are things trade with each other. Computers and laptops, and semiconductors and integrated circuits. So those are, I mean, this is what one of the tensions, because the embargo, the so-called embargo in certain, all right. Okay, I want to go to the next one. The next one is, what are the policy response from China? I'm talking about China. Let me have something to do. So very, very importantly, maybe I should have sort of make the first one double black. The technology. China is I mean, technology or industrial policy is no longer the sensitive words, because everyone is doing it now. In the past, when you say industrial policy, it says, oh, terrible, bad. But now everyone is doing it. But China has its own sort of tradition and practice for many years, and they just double down on that. Maybe 10 years ago, when I was talking to a former colleague who's in a think tank, and I asked, do you know that resources you put in the national state-related institutions and labs and so on are less efficient, a lot of wasteful. You throw money around and then you hope that someone's going to come up with something. So why don't we do a more efficient way and things like that? And he says, yes, of course we know. Of course everyone knows. But what can you do? You just, the ones that you really want to have, you just throw money at it. And you throw money at not just one player. You build different institutions, labs, national labs, and so on and so forth, and hopefully someone will come up with something. So that's the mentality. That's the mentality. The government believes, or at least the policymakers believe, that's the sort of the workable way. And at the same time, I think they also recognize that if you want to have a system that's very inside out or bottom up rather than top down, that needs a lot of institutional changes, the ecosystem changes. So that's not going to be useful for you today, because you are having a crisis. You're having a crisis, you need something. And China also has its strengths. It has its strengths in the sense that you do have a nationalized, university-related Ministry of Science, Ministry of MIS, I don't remember the names of those of ministries. There's a system, and the government believes, at least from outside observers' point of view, the government believes that is the most effective way, not the most money efficient, but most doable way. So they built up that system, strengthened that system. But I do want to say that the private investment in R&D are taking a very large share of that. The reason is when the government comes in certain sectors, and the private money sees that the government is focusing on that, I'm going to follow. I'm going to follow, because that is going to be very, in Chinese term, patient money, patient investment. And in technology, science and technology, you do need that long-term investment. Who is going to be willing to do that? You're only going to do that when you have a lot of money, and you have the determination to do that. All right. So I do want to say that this technological capacity is not just one player. The other point on the building of the capacity is also has another element which the government is also using a lot more market conforming measures, government funds. You have the so-called the big fund, that's for the chips, and then you have funds at the central level for the sectors that they are eyeing at, and then local government do the same thing. So this is not just government throw money because the government don't have that much money. The money is used to indicate, to signal the private investors and to also use money. So they're actually looking at the private industries as well. So if the industries see the opportunities, they don't care about that. I want to make money. So I do this, and the government say, oh, okay, this may be, the businesses have a much forward-looking perceptions on what's going to come up. And then the government also follows. So this is a sort of interactive efforts to strengthen. The second one I want to highlight is that Xi Jinping, since he's in office in 2013, one thing he's been very consistent is environmental, the carbon issues. He's been very consistent in that. And related to that, in China's technology advancement and the green technology is very much into each other. So that's part of why we see BYD all over the place, and I haven't tried one. But I do have one back in China, my relatives. It's very good. You don't need to be good at driving, so you can go places and feel at ease. So green technology and the technology of tomorrow, AI nowadays, is very much integrated in the policy consideration. This one I want to put it here, not because it's third important, but because it's important and difficult, and government always mentions that. How long does it take? But you need the social welfare. A lot of other things need to happen for this consumption part, which we haven't seen yet. All right. Okay, so before that, I also want to say that the real estate sector, the Chinese intention is not to revive, but to stabilize, because it affects a lot of people's livelihood. Yes, question?
In your previous slide, you shown that what US buys from China. In that part, I'm looking for the apparel export item, but in that slide, I'm not find the apparel items. But even Comtrade.
You mean Apple?
Apparel, textile item, textile.
Oh, textile.
Garment and textile.
Okay.
Yes, the previous slide.
Okay.
I'm not finding, a little bit confused.
Okay, yes. So you mean this one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Plastic monitors, these are the major things from
yes,
China to the US. You don't see garment?
Yeah, exactly. Garment is one of the major exporting item so far.
Oh, okay. So it's there, but it's not top. It's not among the top.
Yes, but according to UN Comtrade, almost $34 billion export to US so far. So far I know, China export to US.
You mean why the garment is not here?
Exactly.
Because other things are because China has been quite important in this electronics. Electronics can have become number one in bigger category, depending on the small category or bigger category. So electronics, basically export of electronics has become a lot more important. I don't remember the percentage. It's probably in the 40 to 50%, that bigger category, number one. Number two, China has been purposely relocating its production facilities or capabilities to developing countries in Southeast Asia. So that's part of the answer, perhaps. You want to add to that?
As a student of economics, my question is maybe silly, you think, as you are a doctor of economics, but why is so much concern about the slow growth? Because when China used to be a small economy, now it has become a giant. In every economy, if you see the pace of growth, when it used to be small, it would be fast, 7, 8, 9, 10. But now it's 20 trillion, close to 20 trillion. So growth, the pace of growth of the economy
naturally comes down, right?
Sorry? You say?
Naturally
comes down.
Yeah. So why are we concerned about that?
Yeah, the only thing that we should be concerned about that the share of youth in the population, as far as the Chinese economy is concerned. And if you think that income equality, so it's not the China's problem, it's a problem with the system, it's a problem with the capitalist system. Because China used to be, if I'm not, maybe
I don't have
mistaken.
a problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem. It's a communist party in name, in practice. Whatever works.
No.
It's a very pragmatic.
No. It's a Chinese economy has become a capitalist economy. No, it talks about communism. I was thinking about the economic model, because in capitalism we say that profit maximization is the topmost priority. So exploitation is a part of that. So it's a problem with the capitalist system, not the Chinese economy. I think is my question. Maybe silly, but
No. That's fair. Do later. How many more I have?
Let me hang on just a minute. Doctor, do you just want to go through your slides?
Sure. Then we can come back.
After, okay.
Because I saw that. All right.
We'll have time.
Yeah, I have time. We have time. Okay, so this is from UN Comtrade data for 26, as of May 26th this year. So I'm sure there's still a lot of Chinese garments goes there. And then in terms of why we worry about that, yeah, good question. Because employment, because the sense of people always thought like tomorrow is going to be better, right? Why am I here? Okay. Oh yeah. I'm talking about measures, and we can get to the questions later on. So these are domestically, and some of them actually, for example, real estate consumption, that also helps to address the global imbalances if we can do it more balanced, the so-called balanced development. So what's the response externally? What is China trying to do, at least making efforts to do, is to diversify in both trade and investment, direct investment. And then this one is also depending on how you read it, all right? So China has become more active in global affairs, and also there is a so-called China's version of whatever global governance. They just had some white paper came out not too long ago. But that's, so okay, let me just show some pictures. So here is the R&D. This is usually do with the GDP, but this is for the R&D expenditure. What I do want to highlight again that China's R&D, research and development investment is spending, sorry, not investment. Spending is not just the government top-down. There's bottom-up enterprises, and then you have the government-linked funds, industrial funds, or industrial guidance funds, or whatever it's called. They are more, depending on where the level, the sectors, they are also trying to be much more market-conforming as a capitalist. Each local government is one of the smaller capitalists, then you have the bigger ones. Diversify. The other thing I mentioned is about diversify. So this is the comparative picture to show that in 2020, the blue ones are the countries that traded more with the US compared to China. The red ones is a country traded more with China compared to their trade with the US. And what you can see is 25 years, China has become much more dominant. It's not just trading with how many, it's how many countries as China as the number one because China is number one globally. So this is also from visual. So there are a few things. North America, Latin America, a few African remain to be had more trade with the U.S. A few pictures here are mostly looking at China's trade. China's trade, import, export with bigger regions and with major economies. Okay, so this is the first one, is where China's export goes. This is regional share. So this is Asia. This is trade. So Asia, and where's North America? Is the orange. So you can read it the way you want to read it. Basically, Asia becomes increasingly important and dominate as the market, whether is export or is relocated as facility, or you might say a transshipment. That can also be part of it, depending on how you measure them. It used to be that Hong Kong has played a very important role of transshipment, but this is Asia in general. We can look at the countries later on. And the North America apparently is declining in recent years. This is Europe, are sort of stable. And then you have Latin America, the yellowish. Latin America is also getting a slightly bigger in share. And then Africa and Oceania. All right, so let's see the major, this is the import part. There's photos you can look at later on. Let me just look at the partners, the trading partners. So the U.S. very clearly from 27, 26, now it's 20%, 2025. This is 25. And then you have Hong Kong. Yeah, Hong Kong is, don't read it too much. Japan is quite stable. This is export. South Korea, Germany, and this two is Malaysia and Thailand. Obviously, Vietnam is also a big story, but in terms of size, it's not top 10. All right, so Southeast Asia trade relations. This is the import. Also, this is Taiwan ROC, to be political correct. Okay, South Korea, Japan, the US. So the trade relations with the US on both sides. If I cannot cover this one, you can guess this one, this dark one, the coffee color one. That's Russia. Russia has some visible change in recent few years, and I think it's probably related to energy issue. I also want to show a few on the investment. For the investment, be very careful to look at the investment numbers because this is Hong Kong. And this is the rest of Asia. Because if you put these things together, then you get really very, very cloudy, very hard to read because Hong Kong can play a very important role in investment from Hong Kong to other places, right? So let's just forget this one. And then this is Asia excluding Hong Kong. And then you have Latin America. 2016 is the year that China's outward investment, direct investment, reaches peak. We can see that a lot of the declines are due to investment restrictions from the US as well as Europe, right? Okay, so one more thing is about ASEAN. Here's ASEAN, China's investment in ASEAN member states. All right, so last page. It's just speculations. Of course, no one knows what's going to happen. Yeah, that's it. Now we can have questions.
Okay, start here. Hang on.
Sorry,
That's okay.
I said 30 minutes, but no.
Hi. Hi, thank you for your interesting presentation. I'm Amanda from the Wall Street Journal. I'm based in Singapore. I have two questions. So earlier just now in your presentation, you mentioned that China has become the world's top trading partner in a span of 25 years. We have seen from recent months PMIs, manufacturing PMIs, we have seen like Caixin as well as the other NBS showing mixed data for China PMIs. And also, I just wanted to ask,
PMI in China?
PMI in China, yes.
By Chinese
Yes, the
managers.
private and the public sectors. And also, you know, the question is really like, has more multinational companies actually adopt China plus one strategy? How much manufacturing capacity would China actually lose to Southeast Asia and India? And the second question is that Beijing always set like very ambitious growth target. So I think in the past 2 to 3 years, their target is around 5%. And during the 2 sessions this year, they reduced to 4.5% to 5%. So how much of China's growth target is actually genuinely driven by domestic consumption, or is it propped up by state investment, infrastructure investments? State-led, sorry. Thank you.
Should I just go do something? Because otherwise I have to write it down, because I already forgot the first one. So do I respond before the next set of questions?
No, you can respond. Go ahead.
Okay.
Unless you want to take a couple at a time.
No.
Okay.
So the second question is about growth. The first one again?
Manufacturing
Okay, manufacturing. All right. Okay. So the manufacturing question is China plus one, right? So the China plus one strategy has been there for quite some time for many multinationals, and actually for Chinese businesses as well. So that you have the so-called Chuhai, go to the sea. So that's ever since 2003, China already have the state level policy of the so-called going out. The going out was driven by the state enterprises at the beginning for resources and other security, resource security kind of ambition, and then followed by private sector. But China plus one it's more about expected tensions in trade activities and domestic rising costs, labor costs. So labor cost has risen quite significantly in the 2010s. So now that's combined with geopolitical rivalry and tension and so on. So that strategy is not just multinationals. It has been driven by different factors, and actually, local government has also tried to help some firms to go overseas. Partly because Guangdong has the so-called 腾笼换鸟. So the low-tech companies go away because I need the place for high-tech companies. So because the land price so high, and then they want to attract certain sectors, and they kick out. But as I mentioned, China has great diversity within. So you have Guangdong, and then you go to Guangxi, you go to inland. You have Shanghai and Jiangsu, Zhejiang, and then the Anhui is incorporated in it. So that diversity gave you room, but doesn't guarantee you to do well. So having China plus Southeast Asia, which is close and the supply chain was already there, is just giving more incentives for companies. So I think it's going to continue. Doesn't mean that China is fearful of that, because some of them are intentional. Some of the things you don't want them to leave, but they want to leave. So I don't think that's going to be a bad thing. It's not a bad thing for China's domestic restructuring. It's not a bad thing for closer economic integration in Asia, in China and Southeast Asia and the rest of Asia. So in that sense, I would not be very concerned. But you do have issues that China wants to invest in certain things, they want to buy certain things, but it's being constrained. The partners, the trading partners is being constrained. And you're investing in the US, in Europe, and they have domestic regulations to prevent that. So M&A, merger and acquisition, are also encountering issues where you try to, in Italy, France, and some of the companies are being taken over, and then they're sort of like, oh my God, this is a very good company. Why don't we pay attention to it before? Now it's alarmed. So in that sense, on the growth, I think there's another question. Why is China so focused on the growth target? Even when China grows at 5%, its contribution to global growth is still quite significant, 30% around there, because it's large. Domestically, it's not necessarily the growth rate that's very, very important, but people read those numbers. So China says, 保八, we want to have 8%. Now we said, we expect it to be around 5%. And this year, I think mentioned, as the Liang Hui mentioned, 4.5 to 5. The numbers doesn't really matter. But what matters is that, are you able to secure employment? And I think that's one of the very key concerns. So every year in July, in August, everyone's quite alarmed, quite scared. So what happened to my grad students? Because migrant workers, they can do deliveries, they can do whatever. But college graduate, that's a problem. And that's why I heard that university professors and whatever has the responsibility, or at least you're asked to do, to hire your students, graduating students, for a temporary job, so that we can have a better number to say, our graduates are being employed, somehow being employed. So that is a much more important pressure, more pressing challenge for the government.
Let's go here and then back.
Thank you so much. Oh, is this on?
I can hear you.
Yeah? Okay, excellent. So many questions. This was excellent, by the way. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Maybe you mentioned the delivery economy a few times. I was recently in Beijing, and I was so surprised how cheap Didi, the Chinese Uber, is. I live in Jakarta, same price. How do those people then survive? If you are a delivery guy, how do you survive in Beijing? That's maybe one question. And a second question, you mentioned that you don't always trust the statistics, the numbers, like journalists do. Has it become harder to be an economist, a researcher on China than it was 10 years, 20 years ago? I will stop here maybe.
Okay, so I'll be quick. I see that you might have other things to do later on. So one on first on the delivery. I was in Beijing for 4 months. 4 months last year, visiting person. So I took taxis. One thing is, this is the so-called flexible employment gig worker. The government is pressing the platforms, the companies, to provide some social safety, like the insurance and so on so forth. Not necessarily they do it, but at least the bigger platform companies have to at least protect some protection. The other thing is, I talk to every driver, unless I'm just so sleepy and tired. I always ask them, where are you from? What did you do before? Why are you here if it's so hard? And what they say is that, yes, it's terrible. Food is terrible. Everything is terrible. But if I go back to my hometown, there's no job. There's 0. So compared to 0 to 100, I'll go for the 100. And then at the same time, they try to reduce their cost. For example, the driver will tell me that he gets up in 10 o'clock or something to get the lunch crowd and afternoon peak hour, and then the evening one, and then 11 or something, and he goes to the station to get the EV charge, because that's when the price is lowest, and then he sleeps in the car or something, or go home to get. So they sort of leverage on that, so they know when is cheaper, when is the good crowd for that, because there's no alternative, and that's where the resilience comes from. And then something, my parents pressure me to get married, to get girlfriend, and I don't want to disappoint them, but I don't have time, I don't have money, and I don't have the things that the ladies want, when you marry someone. So that's one. The other one is economist. Okay. From 2013 as the peak, maybe it's the Wall Street Journal have that graph, I don't remember. It's the available number of available statistics from the Chinese official source. It comes down from 2,000 above 2,000 items, down by 70% when that graph came out a couple of years ago. I don't know about now. So it's difficult, but it also there also number one, you have online sources. The companies. When I was in Beijing, someone was doing the consumption downgrading during COVID, and what they use is the pay something, the platform, and they have the consumer in the same restaurant. What did they buy 2 years ago and today? If the person came into the same restaurant, and I know now the item he bought is cheaper, or it's a smaller portion, it's a leveling down thing. So that's one source. The other one is that you can have the cross-checking. You need to cross-check. If you want to look at this one, this look so good, and then you look at the other, no, that's not quite what the reliable numbers. So it's harder, it's more challenging, and that gives economists a job to work. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah, for your contribution. I'm Alada Pitsuwan from Bangkok Business. Yeah. So I have 2 questions from different perspectives. The first one from journalistic perspective. When reporters always use the term that called China overcapacity or China dumping goods, which means
you mean dumping?
China dumping goods, which means it's affect to the perspective of the audience too, because it's mean China export a lot, right? What do you think this term should use in terms of reporting news? And when we say China export a lot, but other way around, if you're trying to stop China to export a lot, it means you're trying to stop them to grow as well. If you rely on export-led growth model. Other question of mine is from academic perspective. I'd like to talk about industrial policy. It seems like flying geese theory was destroyed because of China's rights. Now Thailand have some problem because we used to rely a lot on Japanese investment, and we tie a lot of supply chain with Japan. But now Thailand has been declined already because rising of China. And when China invests in Thailand and other developing countries as well, it seems like we cannot share the supply chain with China because the supply chain is quite short. Right, they're trying to produce everything themselves. So, what is your view on this point? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. The first question on dumping and overcapacity. Yeah. I think the word dumping has its a very clear sort of not just connotation but measurement. There's a meaning to it. Dumping means that you're selling things below your cost. That's dumping. So from WTO standard, dumping, because that's part of the reason why China is trying very hard to be recognized as a market economy. China is a capitalist market economy, but the WTO, at least countries, some members do not recognize. One of the things is that when you are recognized as a market economy, the cost is calculated as you did. But if you're not a market economy, the cost of a products of this, for example, this one is if China make it, but China is not a market economy, so I'm going to use Thailand's cost because I'm just making an example. These two countries have similar development levels. And then I use your cost to say that that's the cost you should be selling above. But in China, it's not. So from the WTO's perspective, you're dumping because I'm not using your data. You're not a market economy. I'm using Mexico. I'm using Vietnam or whoever I think is appropriate. And from that standard, you're dumping. So in that one, that is quite loaded, and that you need to be careful using that. So what's your calculation? What's your foundation for using that term? So that's dumping. Overcapacity it's an easy way to say that you're doing something harming others, right? But overcapacity is a phenomenon that happens in all sectors, many sectors. For example, China is importing soybeans from the US, right? Is US overcapacity on that? Because they cannot consume because this is, for economists, where are our productivity come from? It comes from division of labor, from specialization, right? So you do this, you do better soybeans, and I do better in bok choy, vegetable. Southeast Asia do fruits. So that is normal. But the overcapacity is being utilized or is being used easily because China has such a strong manufacturing capacity and domestic consumption is not matching. So this is the gap, the imbalance between in general, and then you can use overcapacity to say, you're bad. You're bad. So you really need to be careful the substance of that term, because they have their own sort of meanings to it. On Thailand, industrial policy in Thailand, Japan has been in Southeast Asia for many, many years, and the car supply chain has been quite strong in Thailand. But now we're looking at EVs. So the traditional supply chains, the demand are coming down. So that means the supply chain in Thailand that are linked to the Japanese car makers are going to be in decline. And then the new ones that China is building is supply chain. I think Thailand have other areas. The car ones, I understand. I think I don't remember very clearly. I think whether it's battery or something related to the electronic cars or the new automobiles are also there. But as again, I said China has such a diversity. It basically can do. I was in Vietnam a year and a half ago. They said that, we don't like the Chinese investment because they don't hire local workers. They actually bring their own chairs. So we can build chairs, but why do they do? Their offices import chairs from China because cheaper, right? Cheaper, and I mean this is you have to. It's a process. And why the Chinese companies do that? Because that's my supplier back in China, so I know them. So this is quite a painful adjustment needed. So that's why regional cooperation is essential, because Southeast Asia has been such a very good place for Chinese businesses to extend, to rebuild and strengthen the supply chains. But it's very hard to do business in Southeast Asia, by the way, I heard, because the countries are different, right? We all have our own national interest. But it's hard. It's hard. Sorry.
That's probably a good place to stop. It's very hard. But I know there are so many more questions to get to. Nothing
I apologize
personal.
for talking about too many things, so I guess questions.
No. But you said you were intimidated talking to a bunch of journalists. You are not.
I pretend to not.
You held your own quite well. So I want to thank Dr. Tong very much.
Thank you. Thank you.